The following podcast may contain adult language and conversations revolving around situations not suitable for immature audiences. Spoilers and general political incorrectness can often be expected, so listener discretion is advised.
They must be destroyed on sight!
Welcome to another episode of They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. This is episode 53, it should be, and we're continuing our little look at noir-ish crime films. I'm your host, Lee Russell, and I'm joined by my co-host, Daniel Harper. How are you doing, sir?
Doing all right, making it through. Getting there. Watched some Gene Hackman movies this week, so some great classic noirs from the 70s. No complaints, really.
Right on.
Sorry, spoilers for what I'm going to say about the films, but
yeah,
they're both at least above average. I'll just say that.
So before we get into that, just want to quickly mention that we now have a Facebook group. After being coerced by Stuart Bulk from Midnight Movie Cowboys several times over and over, I finally relented and made one. Anyone's welcome to join. Just look for They Must Be Destroyed on Sight on Facebook, and you can come in and talk movies, give us suggestions for movies you want to see us review, and hopefully everyone will be cordial and not be dicks. That's basically the only rule is don't be a dick. And don't spam all over the place.
Don't be an asshole. I will kick you out of the group if you're an asshole, or I'm sure Lee will support that as well. Golden rule, people. Treat people like you'd like to be treated, and that's kind of where I land on it.
Yeah, and Facebook is probably the best possible place for people to leave feedback for us too, because Facebook, everyone has it these days, so it's just more convenient. I know people don't necessarily like sending emails or hunting through little message boards and stuff on podcast websites and all that garbage. So if that ends up being the central hub for people to send us feedback, that would be great. Speaking of feedback, our newest member to the board, Robert Hook, said he's digging the show. He loved the in-depth discussion on Fritz Lang's M that we did. He's tired of hearing comments like, yeah, that's a classic, or great movie. We need more serious and in-depth discussion on film. There's such a rich history with cinema, and I'm glad there are those who discuss it and respect it. I certainly enjoy listening and picking up bits of knowledge here and there. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, sir. He went on to, after you asked him, he went on to suggest some films for us to cover sometime.
No guarantees we're going to get to whatever people suggest, but we're always, at least for me, I'm always interested in seeing what people want to hear us talk about, just because, we can just randomly pick stuff from a hat, basically the way we've been doing this to now is really just like, hey, what do you want to do next week? And then we just start picking up titles. It's really kind of catch as catch can. Mm-hmm. And it's always nice to kind of get, well, you guys are listening. What do you want to hear? So, that's just kind of where I landed on that. Hey, tell us what you want to see. So, hell, let's do a Patreon and whore ourselves out to, the highest bidder. Like, hey, put $50 to this podcast, and you can pick a series. We'll do a whole series on My Little Ponies fan fiction, or something.
Oh man, we both must be thinking on the same wavelength, because I was about to mention that as much as we're open to suggestions, we're not going to be doing any brony movies or anything like that. So.
I feel like there are certain genres that I would be okay doing hey, let's do a couple of good romantic comedies or something,
Mm-hmm.
But there are certain genres that we're more interested in than others, and I don't know that the fans, the audience is really even don't torture us, pick stuff you'd actually like to see us, listen to us talk about, and if it is stuff that's kind of outside our wheelhouse, give us a reason,
Mm-hmm.
If you say, hey, there's this Drew Barrymore movie I think you guys should really talk about, I'm fine with that, just justify it slightly,
Yeah.
So,
don't just suggest the new Star Wars film just because it's the new Star Wars film.
Right. I don't have any problem doing that, but it's also everybody else is doing that. I don't know. I kind of like that we're just picking stuff, old stuff for the most part. So,
But I did like Mr. Hook's suggestions, though. I think 2001 was one of them, and a Herzog retrospective he mentioned, which really piqued my interest. So I think we're definitely might be doing that sometime in the near future.
Yeah, Herzog's been on our list for a while, and yeah, I mean 2001. I mean, God, what do we say about 2001 that hasn't already? Actually, that the book means a lot to me personally. So I think I could talk quite eloquently about 2001. I have a long history with that property. So I was going to say, what are we going to say about 2001? And then I thought, oh, wait, no, actually, I could totally fill an hour on 2001.
Right on. But Robert, thanks for the suggestions. They are on our Google Doc that we have where we just list possible movies to pick from. So they're in the pool, and more likely than not, some of them are going to be picked. Yeah.
I'm also going to try to start writing up little things about the movies I'm watching. I won't promise I do every single one, but so that you can kind of follow along with what I'm watching as I'm watching it and kind of throw them up there and kind of try to get people to comment on that as well. So kind of go from there. That's kind of my feeling of like, hey, let's just put up some content for people. Hey, this is what I'm watching. See what's up, you know.
Yeah, right on. All right, so we don't have any other real feedback this week, so we could just move directly into what we've watched in the last little while. So I'll throw that over to you, Daniel.
Sure. Well, I have one that so I dug up on Henry's recommendation, on our good friend Henry's recommendation. I did dig up a French version of Virgin Among the Living Dead. I totally bought the Blu-ray, right? Like that's what I mean by that. I went out, I spent the $15 on the Blu-ray. Whenever we talk about finding movies and stuff, everything that we watch on this show, we've purchased legally. I just want to make that clear to the audience. That's the way we do things here. No, that's not true at all.
No.
But so anyway, I found a copy of the French version of Virgin Among the Living Dead. I hate to say it, but Henry's right. I don't like to say night and day difference, but it's a fucking night and day difference.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Not just because of I mean, first of all, I almost always watch films with subtitles whenever possible.
Mm-hmm.
I just find it's easier for me to follow kind of the plot. I don't miss pieces of dialogue and that sort of thing. So I just like watching it with subtitles in general. It's pretty clear. I did a little bit of reading on this. The English dub is based on the 1981 cut of the film, the kind of the later cut. And it's a hack job. It's such a fucking hack job. It's not even so much that the dub is different as much as it's kind of bullet pointed. You know, it's very kind of, it misses a lot of the subtlety of the actual dialogue when you actually read it. The performances are really, really terrible in the dub. I mean, we both watched it with the dub. It highlights just how bad it is when you hear the original French, and the original French is like significantly better acting. It makes a difference. Not only that, but the score has been changed in certain sequences. It's a much more kind of haunting, evocative score in the French version. You get a sense of this kind of encroaching claustrophobia more because there's certain like sound design elements where you like kind of hear stuff through walls and you kind of get a better sense of kind of it feels a lot less like random shit is happening as much as like the scene where you see Jess Franco and he's got the bird and he's like staring at it. You actually hear as she's kind of walking up to the door, you kind of hear like movement behind the door and you hear a little bit of dialogue of him like talking to the woman about, I just, I killed the thing or whatever. I mean, so it feels a lot more cohesive and it really does make a huge difference. I thought, the English dub I could barely follow. I was just kind of like, this is just random and kind of stupid. And Henry's absolutely right about the French dub being actually a pretty decent little movie. I mean, it still has its problems. Biggest issue I would have is simply that the lead actress is just not very good. Once you can follow the rest of the film and once you're kind of on board with like the way that the film is actually supposed to be seen, man, she's really good at doing that doe-eyed innocent look. She is less good at kind of selling the loneliness and desperation that leads her to actually stay with this family, and kind of reach out for this family. this is probably a DVD I am going to purchase at some point, or Blu-ray. Pardon me. I'm probably going to buy this Blu-ray just because I've heard there's a really nice commentary from someone, and there's an interview with Jess Franco and that sort of thing. And it sounds like it might actually be worth kind of delving into, because it sounds like from reading that there's this kind of really abstract set of symbolism that Franco's using in the film, and the stuff that really meant something to him personally, and that just doesn't come through at all in the version that we saw, and in particular in the English dub. It's so hacked to shit that it's just kind of pointless. If you're going to watch it in French, and I think you probably should. Like, if you're a fan of Jess Franco at all, it's probably worth at least a look, see if you can get a hold of it.
Cool, right on.
Yeah. So, I wasted another 90 minutes of my life on Virgin Among the Living Dead. But it wasn't a waste. It was actually, I was kind of expecting to, I'll watch 20 minutes of this and kind of get, it's better, but it's not. But it really makes a difference. I found it to be a significantly superior experience. So I watched, a few months ago, I talked about a documentary called Restrepo, which is the documentary of soldiers in the Korengal Valley in Afghanistan. And then there's this kind of sequel movie called Korengal, and it's streaming on Netflix. And I was kind of like, it's a kind of war documentary. Actually, the reason I kind of picked this up, it's connected to some of the conversation I'm going to have about the conversation later. Okay. So I'll kind of do that. But I did kind of go, I remember I liked Restrepo, and it was either on my best of last year or it was kind of near my best of last year list. Man, Korengal is so not as nearly as good a film as Restrepo was.
Oh, really?
It was really disappointing. It does the thing of like putting you in a kind of you are there kind of aspect of this kind of infantry unit in Afghanistan, but it definitely feels a lot like B-roll from Restrepo. It's a lot more kind of like, and this is just extra footage we had that we just didn't fit in the first film. There's a little bit of a framing narrative where the first film really at least tries to kind of get you in the heads of these soldiers, but also kind of shows kind of the impotence of the kind of military machine and shows kind of the larger context, even while kind of embedding you with them. Korengal is a lot more like uncritically rah-rah. There's a lot less of a sense of kind of actually trying to get some distance and try to like analyze what's actually going on. And it's a lot more kind of like, look at these guys and look at what all they've done and their heroes and that sort of thing. And, I don't have any problem with kind of valorizing people who have decided to, kind of put their lives on the line for their country and that sort of thing. I mean, there's a big conversation we can have about that. But when you're going into this kind of very controversial war and this kind of, and not kind of ask the question of like, why exactly are these guys here? What are they doing? Like at one point, one of the guys wins a medal. The documentarian asks him, like, how do you feel? Like, are you? And he's like, I'm proud. I did something. We actually did something good, and I won a medal for it, and that's what I'm proud about. And I mean, what did you do? Like, what did you win this? Like, what exactly did you do? You killed some guy, or you helped, you prevented some guy from killing your guys. But why? Like, what's the overall purpose? And that's what I think the film just completely drops the ball on. So I would highly recommend Restrepo. I think Restrepo is really good. Korengal is, it's not terrible, but it was definitely not nearly the film, and it kind of it really does lose a lot of that context. So that's kind of where I land on that. And then while I was watching that, I kept going, man, what we need is an Errol Morris documentary about this, because I've been a little bit of an Errol Morris kick lately. Yeah. And there's an Errol Morris film I haven't seen yet called The Unknown Knowns. This is basically, if you've seen The Fog of War, I don't know, you've seen a bunch of the Errol Morris stuff, Lee, or not?
Honestly, I can't say if I've seen a lot of it or not.
Well, he's made 3 films now that are kind of about the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq. He made The Fog of War, which he actually interviewed Robert McNamara, who was one of the architects of the Vietnam War during the Kennedy administration. Okay. And that was kind of about, like, he's talking about, like, what it is to go to war in general. And kind of drawing some conclusions about Iraq without, like, kind of in the run-up to Iraq, without, like, saying this is about Iraq. And then he made Standard Operating Procedure, which is about the abuses at Abu Ghraib, and kind of talks a lot about, the photographs and why the photographs were taken and that sort of thing. And then he made The Unknown Knowns, and this is an interview with Donald Rumsfeld, who was a complete fucking asshole, one of the total douchebag, Secretary of Defense. Morris is able to let Rumsfeld talk, and to let Rumsfeld tell his story in his own words, and not even really challenge him, but at the same time, through editing and through selection and through reenactment and that sort of thing, kind of give us that distance that Korngold lacked so much of. It's not quite where I'd say watch these two together, because it's totally not like the kind of thing where you should watch them together, but it was definitely a palate cleanser, and that's what I needed after watching Korngold, was something that was just going to kind of add some perspective back to this whole horrifying quagmire of a war we've found ourselves in Afghanistan. That was the kind of stuff that I watched this week, in addition to watching 70s crime films. So, and I promise I'm going to connect all that to the conversation here shortly. So
awesome! I look forward to it. The only thing I really need to mention that I watched was an old Hammer film from 1959. I was perusing Netflix from the UK, and they have The Man Who Could Cheat Death from 1959, starring an actor called Anton Differing. You might not know the name, but you'll definitely know the face because he's famous for playing Nazis. Some interest to you, Daniel, he actually played, and to me actually too, because it's one of my favorite doctors, he played a Nazi in Silver Nemesis.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, that guy?
Yeah.
Wow.
That was like his last role.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, no. Man, Silver Nemesis is terrible. But, But yeah, no, that's a cool. I just put that on my to watch list. So I'm gonna check that out.
It has a lot of talking in it and not enough action, I would say, for the most part. But it does have an interesting premise. It's basically this sculptor who has prolonged his life by eating, I guess, the parathyroid glands of young women. Basically, not eating them, but making a serum out of them.
That's the way you keep your youth, by eating out young women.
It worked for Bathory or whatever her name was, bathing in the blood of women.
Bathing in the blood, yeah, no,
yeah.
The thing.
But it's an interesting premise. It sort of mixes mad scientist with sort of gothic kind of horror at the same time to a certain degree. And it's just one of the sort of Hammer curiosities that most people don't know about. So it definitely is worth checking out. It's not a terrible movie or anything, but it is a little dry, but it is worth checking out.
Cool. Well, it's on my list. I'll try to check that out at some point. Actually, City of the Dead just released a new episode, so expect me to have at least one more Amicus film watched for next week. So
didn't they do the Psychopath?
They did the Psychopath. Yep.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I have to watch it and then listen to the episode. I have the episode on my MP3 player.
I'm actually a couple behind for them because I still haven't watched The Skull, and I need to listen to that one too. So I'll try to get both of those watched and talked about for next week. Although I keep adding more movies to my list. It's ridiculous, like how many movies are on my to watch list. I
think The Skull is on Netflix right now, isn't it?
Is it?
Maybe it's just the British Netflix.
It's possible. I mean, it's totally different in the U.S. We don't get anything good in the United States, man. It's only former Commonwealth countries that get.
Well, no, I hear all the other countries always say, "Oh, well, our Netflix is shit, and the U.S. has the superior one." But me using just VPNs and going to the different types of Netflix, it's like there's definitely more stuff on the US Netflix, but the variation on some of the other countries, like just the interesting little obscurities that pop up, definitely makes it worthwhile.
Yeah, there's definitely some oddball stuff out there. I mean, you remember, and this is something I actually want to have like a full conversation about at some point, for this podcast. But you remember back when, like 5 years ago, when Netflix was kind of the only game in town, and they had giant archives that you could just sit and watch. Like it felt like you could like put in almost any movie that was like at all, kind of available. And if it wasn't there, at least it was kind of like, oh, there's something similar that was like something else that was kind of on my like, oh, I would love to watch that. Yeah. It really feels like that aspect of the Netflix experience has just gone way downhill. And I mean, it's because these companies, the distribution companies, have started to realize like, hey, we can actually make money streaming this for ourselves. And they're starting to like boost their price if Netflix wants it, which I completely understand. But I feel like I would like to get to the point where I can put the title of a movie into Google, and it can tell me where I can stream this legally. What I have to do. Like it should be like almost instant. I should be able to put in The Skull into Google right now with maybe like for something like The Skull, like a date. The Skull 1961 or whatever, and it should just tell me, oh, if you have Hulu Plus, you can watch this for $1.99 or whatever.
Yeah.
Some movies you can do that. Sometimes there really is that kind of option, but I want that to be much, much easier to figure out what my options are for watching a movie, because right now it's just kind of frustrating because I feel like I have to check like 5 different sites if I'm looking for a particular movie.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I don't necessarily I believe in supporting like artists and movies and stuff. I don't like going to Foot Locker to find something.
Yeah.
But if I have to do it, I'm going to fucking do it.
Well, and here's the other place I land on this. Like, I mean, you guys are like, Netflix has to understand you're competing with free.
Mm-hmm.
That's always the thing when you're on the internet, because you're never going to crack down on it 100%. You've got to make your product so easy to use and so intuitive that I would rather pay you for it than go get it for free. Yep. Like, that's sort of, and I hate that that's kind of where we are on the internet. Like, I would much rather pay some service fee or whatever and just have access to this stuff. And I just want these guys to like get their shit together and make it to where I can do that. And I want like, a deep catalog. I don't want like the last 20 movies that were released on Blu-ray this year. I don't care about the Avengers 2. I want to watch the Skull. You know what I mean? And I want like a bunch of that shit. And so we're just kind of in this weird place where I feel like there are more films available than ever before if you're kind of willing to go into kind of gray market or black market or whatever, pirating and that sort of thing. Almost everything is available if you look for it hard enough. Mm-hmm. But I want it to be like above board. I want to actually see these filmmakers get paid for this stuff, and I'm happy to pay like a monthly fee to have that. And that's just that's my rant. Sorry, I'm completely aside the point, but like I keep thinking about this. So
yeah, I'm not sure what movie companies are doing right now, but I mean, there's untapped revenue and resources in those little burn a DVD for you services. There's I think untapped money in just making those available on a subscription service online.
Well, if Warner Brothers is willing to like basically make you a DVD and ship it to you for $10 or whatever, they should basically. I mean, even if they like farm it out to somebody, even if Warner Brothers basically just sells their whole catalog to
just
Amazon
give it to Netflix and skim off
Netflix, and say we want a certain percentage of it. But I mean, if they're willing to burn a DVD, it seems like they've got a digital copy sitting there somewhere. They can serve that digitally. It's easily as they can do a DVD of it.
Yeah.
And I mean, even if it was $2 a movie, like if you want to do like a purchase fee or a rental fee or something, and make it like super cheap but easy, or a streaming, watch as much as you want. Like, do you know how many like old Warner Brothers movies I would watch if I could just watch them for free on a service?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, what the BBC is doing now. They're basically moving to put all their content on their own BBC branded streaming service, and that's kind of been the big thing over in the Doctor Who world, is that all the Doctor Who left all the streaming services because the BBC is putting together their own service. I wish that they had made that a little more seamless, because now it's like there's no way to watch it except to do it illegally, but. It feels like people are moving that way. It's just frustrating when they make it harder.
It'll be a great day for everybody when region blocking and all that shit finally goes by the wayside.
Yeah,
definitely will. That was a nice little lengthy aside we dropped into. Yeah. I hope everyone enjoyed that.
Congratulations, audience.
Yeah.
I feel like nobody actually comes here to listen to us talk about the movies that we are supposed to come here and talk about anyway. So
they should want to hear about these movies. So let's start off with 1974's The Conversation.
This is a world of hidden mics and two-way mirrors. A world where nothing is private.
Do you think we can do this?
Later in the week.
Do you think we can do this?
Harry Cole is an expert. The best there is.
Let me tell you something about Harry Cole. The best, bar none. I'll drink to that.
Best what?
The best bugger on the West Coast.
What about me?
He can bug anybody, anytime, anywhere.
Nobody knows how you did it, though, Harry. Caused a hell of a scandal, too.
Where? Do you see him? The man with the hearing aid, like Charles. He's been following us all
They're
over.
not people to him, just voices.
3 people were murdered, that's all.
He doesn't know them, and they don't know him.
It had nothing to do with me. I mean, I just turned in the tapes.
Bless me, Father, for I've sinned. I've been involved in some work that I think will be used to hurt these 2 young people. No, we're responsible. I'm not responsible.
You're not supposed to feel anything about it. You're just supposed to do it.
Be careful, Harry. You're just supposed to listen. Not look, not feel, not care.
Yes. How'd you get this phone number?
We prepare a full dossier on everyone.
That's terrific. The bugger got bugged, huh?
Do you have secrets, Harry? I know you do. Telling me about yourself? Secrets?
I don't have any secrets.
Don't get involved in this, Mr. Cole. Those tapes are dangerous.
Come on, Harry. Show and tell. How'd you do it?
Why are you asking me all these questions?
Gene Hackman is Harry Call in The Conversation. There is nothing private about The Conversation. Listen.
My name is Harry Call. Can you hear me?
1974, directed and written by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Gene Hackman as Harry Call, John Cazale as Stan, Alan Garfield as Bernie Moran, Frederick Forrest as Mark, Cindy Williams as Anne, Michael Higgins as Paul, Elizabeth McCree as Meredith, Terry Garr as Amy, and Harrison Ford in a bit part as Martin Stett. And I'll let you give a little brief synopsis if you feel like it there, Dan.
I didn't get a chance to write out my typically more involved synopses this week, so I apologize to the audience. But The Conversation is the story of Harry Call, played by Gene Hackman, who is basically the best in the biz. When it comes to snooping, he's the best bugger in the business, which doesn't have the dirty meaning you might think it does. He is a man who is both very technically accomplished. He kind of looks and acts like an accountant. He's a very soft, quiet man, bit of a paunch, but he's a very private man. He's very connected to his privacy. At one point, he gets onto his landlady for opening his birthday card and knowing when his birthday is. He doesn't have a home phone line, or he pretends not to. He doesn't give out his home phone. Mm-hmm. And he keeps his own secrets. The film basically follows him as he simultaneously has his greatest technical accomplishment in capturing this conversation between 2 young people. Some of the content of that conversation may not be exactly clear, but the audio file certainly is, and that's all that Harry cares about, until it might turn out that some terrible things might happen to these young people. And what follows from that is basically at turns moves into both Harry's obsession with his own privacy and with his technical expertise, and with the way the world around Harry responds to that.
I really love this film. Every time I watch this, I get more out of it. I feel kind of staggered almost every time I watch this film, because there's so much that I sort of pick up every time. Like, I watched this twice for the podcast in the last week, and both times I picked up more from it. I just love the central performance from Gene Hackman here. This is a guy who was at the time was sort of at the sort of peak of his career. He was 44 at this point.
He was born in 1930, so yeah, he was 44 at the time this film was made.
Before he did this film, he was more how he looks in Night Moves. He's very physically fit. Francis Ford Coppola basically had him change himself physically so much to make him look more like you said, an accountant or something like that, right?
Well, I was gonna say, and this is kind of gets into a little bit of my personal life. My father died last year. It was kind of a weird week for me because my dad, it kind of struck me. My dad was a big Gene Hackman fan. Not necessarily, I mean, I'm sure he liked his 70s work, but I always remember like Hoosiers and Bat 21 and Crimson Tide. He always loved his later stuff. And so this was kind of connecting me to my dad a little bit. But also, my dad kind of looked a lot like Gene Hackman did in the conversation. You know, like he didn't have the mustache, but I mean, he had kind of that. He kind of dressed similarly. He kind of had the tie and the rumpled shirt, and he kind of had a paunch, and he kind of stood that way. And it was kind of this weird, Gene Hackman in this film looks like my dad did when I was growing up. You know. So and my dad was certainly no action hero. Let's just put it that way. I feel like it's got, he kind of looks like my dad, my kind of boring baby photographer father. That was what my dad did during his career. He took to studio portraits, and he was pretty good at it. But never set the world on fire. Sorry to the memory of my father, but he was a small man, and that's who Harry Caul is in this film.
He's actually a very small man in this film. I think that's the interesting thing about this character is, although he is considered by his peers to be the best bugger on before he moved to the West Coast, the East Coast, or whatever. But
what's his name? Munson? Is it Munson? Is that
Moran? I guess Bernie Moran.
Bernie Moran. Yeah, Moran. Keeps wanting. Oh no, you're the best on the West Coast. I'm the best on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And Detroit is not on the East Coast. Detroit is on the third coast. I'm a Michigander. We know these things. But also, like, Moran is in no way anywhere near as good as Harry Caul. So I just wanted to.
Yeah,
he's basically the best in the world. Like, I mean, I think that we can kind of establish that. I mean, the anger that Moran has towards Harry when Harry won't tell him how he did that certain thing, it's just palpable, and it just shows how good this guy is at what he does.
But at the same time, he's absolutely terrible about keeping his own privacy intact. This is a guy who, like you said, his landlady knows his phone number, has a key to his room, knows when his birthday is. His girlfriend, which is essentially a kept mistress of his, that he pays for her apartment and everything, she knows whenever he's coming. She's watched him and seen him doing things that he was trying to hide. This is a guy who, for all of his technical proficiency in his job, incredibly bad at keeping his own privacy to almost every degree.
Well, I agree with that, but I think that you can view it as like he's just bad at it, or it's just impossible to do so. And I feel like I think that how you view that question kind of informs how you view the film. Because to me, it's kind of like he is this good. I mean, he is really fucking good at what he does. And the point that not even Harry Caul can really protect his own secrets from the rest of the world points out how interconnected we all are, and how, essentially this is the world we live in this way that, like, in 74, I have some thoughts about kind of what this means sociologically, but certainly in like 2016, with the internet and Facebook and cell phones and, cryptography, and, we live in this world so much more. And I mean, we basically just pretend we have privacy at this point, but you don't. Like, if somebody wants to, you don't have privacy at all anymore. I don't care how much privacy, how much cryptography you think you have on your computer or whatever. You are not as secret as you think you are. It just doesn't exist.
You essentially you have to live out in the woods. At this point,
even living in the woods. I mean, if somebody really wants to know, I mean, spy satellites and Google Earth and all these sorts of things. I mean, you are not safe from this invasion, and that's a question. I mean, the technology exists. The technology can do this. The technology can take your privacy from you, and I think that the question that we have to ask, and I think that the question that the conversation kind of doesn't necessarily ask, but I kind of. We'll get into this. It asks, like, should we be doing these things? It's the technology exists, and the technology is kind of morally neutral. You can use the technology to do all kinds of things that are you can use the technology that allows you to sniff out this conversation. You can use it to shoot films, and you can use it to for all kinds of perfectly benign purposes. The question is, well, how are we actually using it? And that's a question of human nature, not of technology or whatever. And I think that's that point that I kind of kept coming back to with this. And again, I will connect that to the to Koringal here in a second. But I'm wondering how you feel about that question. Like, do you think the film is kind of saying that no one could protect their privacy, or do you think the film is just saying Harry is just kind of bad at it?
Oh no, I think your point that no one can protect their privacy is definitely apt. I think the big thing here, and this is a film that follows Harry's point of view exclusively. Like there is nobody else's point of view in this film, really. So the audience is following Harry, and the audience sees what Harry sees, and you might interpret it differently, but you see how he interprets things. And I think Harry is kind of fooling himself. Like, I think he believes that he can protect his privacy. The irony, of course, is that he's in a business all about invading other people's privacy, and he can't protect his own, even though he believes he can.
It's almost a little bit on the nose, right? Like, I mean, it's a little bit. I mean, I'm not. This isn't a criticism, but it's very much that kind of surface level. Oh, we've got this guy who's kind of a master listener on other people's conversations, and so therefore he's completely paranoid about other people listening. I mean, it feels like this very kind of obvious thing, but it's so inhabited by Hackman, and it's so built around like the cinematography and the direction. Mm-hmm. Harry lives and works in a cage. Like, he literally lives and works in this cage in the middle of a warehouse. Like, he's terrified of people being able to encroach upon him. I mean, I'm almost surprised he has a landlady. I mean, I'm surprised he doesn't own his own property. It's kind of
actually, funny you mentioned that. Originally in the script, he was supposed to be the landlord of his building.
Oh, well, and
his landlady was supposed to be his tenant, but they rewrote it.
That's interesting. I mean, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, Harry. I think the thing here is that Harry is a freelancer, right? Like, he is not tied to any agency, really. He's a freelancer, so he's always looking over his own shoulder all the time. Like, I mean, he has to have work, but he doesn't trust anyone he works for. They value his professionalism. They value his, him not saying anything and just going about on his business.
Well, he doesn't care about the content. And I mean, I think that's the, like, you see this all the time in kind of technical people who have jobs that, like it's not my job to know what they're saying and to care about the content of the conversation. My job is to know how to set the microphones and how to drill in and get in and be secret and actually capture this. My job is to make sure other people can hear this clearly. And we let's take this out of Harry Call. We all do this, in your job, in my job, and in everything we do. I do my little piece. I do it well. I do, and I don't think about kind of the broader social implications of what I'm doing, I think and that's kind of where I say, it's a criticism not of, Harry specifically, although, we are kind of all like Harry. We all kind of do this, in our day-to-day life, and in our work, and our play, and our relationships we have with other people. We all like make decisions about, like, I'm going to just ignore the other stuff that's going on in the world around me. My favorite example that I like to use, if you've got a smartphone, if you've got a touchscreen, device of some kind, that device is made with, part of that is using rare earth elements. Rare earth elements are, you don't have to know what those are, but they're mined in like these horrifying like mines in Africa and China. Where people are dying so that you can have a cheap electronic device. That's just making that's just for a microgram of some weird element that's used for this particular resistance that it needs in order to do your phone. Again, that's off topic, but I mean it is like connected right back to that whole Harry doesn't care, and we all don't. We all kind of run into that. We don't care about the broader thing. And are we all kind of like Harry? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is that Harry has convinced himself for the longest time that he doesn't care, but he really does, because he's presented as a Catholic, and one of those Catholics where he's always guilty of something. He's not the sort of Catholic that necessarily finds any solace in making confession. It's just a part of his life constantly to make confession. Right. Because it's hinted that in the past, as a result of his job, he got 2 people killed, a woman and a child. And here he starts to feel like that might be happening again when he hears the conversation between these two young people in the park that they were scoping out. I have a question for you, because there's something I picked. I think there is even something else I picked up on here. I don't know if it's just me or not, but I kind of feel like he's maybe falling in love with the woman in the park to a certain degree, because it seems like he has a bit of a direct obsession with her more than anything else. I mean, he even has a dream about her specifically.
I could read that. I mean, certainly. I mean, I don't think it's explicit. I think it's subtext. I think that it's certainly something you can read into the film. I don't have an issue with that reading at all. You're right that he does have the dream about the woman. I don't know that it's like a kind of romantic or sexual thing as much as it's a kind of a masculine, I need to be the protector. Like, somebody's going to kill this woman. I mean, even though somebody's going to kill both of them, it's kind of what he believes. But I mean, there is this kind of like desire to protect the woman, sort of thing. And I don't know that it has to go any deeper than that. But certainly, I mean, one of the issues that you run into with people who do this for a living is they become enamored with the people they follow, and they become, they get, they start looking at girls' tits. I mean, let's be honest. That's what, bored guys with security cameras, that's what they do.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of like, I wasn't thinking necessarily it was super deep, like a real affection or love, but I felt like there was some sort of shades of that sort of particular phenomenon.
I mean, he runs into her in the elevator at the and he's kind of looking at her, and he kind of, you do get a sense in his performance that that there is this, I don't want to say intimacy, but there's this tenderness, this kind of a distance that he cannot bridge, but at the same time, that there is this sense of like that feeling for her specifically might be part of the thing that's helping him to push him to some of the decisions he makes later in the film. So I get that reading. I didn't read it that way on my viewing, but I buy it.
Yeah, it was only after watching it a couple times that I sort of picked up on that. But all right.
Probably my favorite sequence in the film is towards the middle, the kind of extended kind of two big scenes, two big set pieces. The trade show that he goes to, where he kind of runs into Moran, and kind of the extended bit there, and then he brings everybody back to his domain and lets people in, and the interactions he has with the various the kind of cast of characters. I mean, it's a good, I don't know, maybe a third of the film, between these two sequences. It's a good middle third, 40 minutes or so, and I hate, saying this third of the film is my favorite bit of the film, but it's such richly detailed character work, and it's such richly detailed work about like this world that this guy inhabits, and you get such a sense like you've got the guy who's making the camera, the kind of no-name inventor guy who's designed this new system, and he's like, oh my god, if Harry Call is using it, all you had to do is like, if I could just get a picture of you like holding it, and I can like advertise it. I mean, you can have one for free, and then you get a sense of like how well respected this guy is in the community, and how he doesn't want any of it. He doesn't want this. And Moran's kind of the opposite. Like he's not a technical guy. He's not like, he doesn't. I mean, he's got some basic technical knowledge. He's not bad at his job. I think he kind of gets a sense like he's a competent workman kind of guy. But he's a film artist.
Yeah, he's a shifty used car salesman. Is what he is, right?
Exactly. And that the kind of conflict between these two ideologies is fascinating. And then of course, he pays the whore. It's such a haunting sequence for me. The relationship that Harry, this very small, very short relationship that he gets into with this model, the kind of the booth bunny woman. I'm sure she has a name. I didn't catch it. I don't have the list in front of me, but I
think that's Meredith. I think that was Meredith. The one.
Okay. Well, we'll say Meredith then. I might have the wrong name, but he does get a sense of tenderness towards her. He does get a sense of I think he kind of knows what's going on. He knows that he's being played to some degree, but he's kind of reaching out for that connection. This man who is like in so many ways, he's trying to protect his privacy, but then when his partner leaves, he kind of has this like, well, if I have to let people in, I need to let people in, and then he gets kind of fucked over because of it, because of kind of the way that ends. I think it's such a human moment. It's such a human kind of sequence. It feels very real to me. It doesn't. There's so much in this film that feels kind of larger than life, or feels kind of surreal, especially when we get to the end. But this is just so richly realized. I thought it was just moving. It was very, very effective for me.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the most effective sort of part of the film, to show just how socially awkward he really is. Like, he is so guarded and so far removed from people that it's at the point where he doesn't necessarily know how to interact with people anymore on a personal level. Almost all of his interactions are professional more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's all he needs. I mean, I think that's what he feels like. This is what I need in my life, and then I've got this girl on the side that I, put her up in this hotel room, and I get that need taken care of. But he treats it almost like a financial transaction,
Yeah.
and almost like I give you one thing, you give me something else, you give me something I need, and that's as far as it goes. Like that's the end of it for him. It is isolating. It's such isolate. This man who has this ability to reach into other people's lives and pull information out is himself. He tries to isolate himself and fails, but
Yeah, well, I mean, perfect example there. His mistress, she actually has genuine affection for him and actually kind of loves him. And when she basically says, "I want more," he runs away. Like, he ends the relationship right there. Like, he turns tails and run.
What do you think of the? Because if I have an issue with the film, and I mean it is a very, very, very good film. I mean this is on my short list for best of the year, obviously. Because I think I said this before we started recording. This is actually the first time I've seen this film all the way through. I kind of knew kind of what the film was, but had not actually sat down and watched it all the way through. So, and that's true of Night Moves as well. So. Both of these films are contenders for best of the year. If I do have a criticism, it's that I think that the move towards like straight out paranoid fantasy and feels slightly unearned to me. And by which I mean, kind of the searching of the hotel room, the blood that comes up. I mean, whether you want to see that as real or a dream sequence is definitely for the mind of the viewer. I see it as a dream sequence. I don't see that as real. I think that where the film kind of ends up, particularly when he starts tearing up the floorboards and that sort of thing. I mean, I get kind of where we're going on this. I feel like it's again just a little bit on the nose for me. I feel like it's a little bit like I wish that there had been a slightly more interesting place to take it than look at him in the ruins of his life, kind of hoisting his own petard, sort of like thing. I mean, I feel like it's making the kind of the very obvious kind of character moment, which I feel like the earlier stuff was so subtle and well realized. And it's not that this is bad, but I wish it had found a slightly more nuanced way of kind of approaching some of these ideas. And I don't know how you feel about that.
I can definitely see where someone would say it does become a bit on the nose in the final third of the film. For me, I bought into the sort of paranoia kind of thing because I think it stems mostly from his guilt. I mean, this is a guy who is pushed to the brink. He feels like he's being watched all the time, which he is, essentially. And he feels extreme guilt for the possibility that he might be getting 2 more people killed, like he got 2 people killed before. I know he sort of tries to justify, like he definitely has sort of slight delusions here and there where he sees the events of the eventual murder in little flashes as he's looking around the apartment, like this is what's going to happen if I don't prevent this. I actually think the toilet scene was real. I actually buy that as real. I don't know. I bought that part as real. I bought the flashes of him seeing like the murders and stuff. I thought that was imagined in his mind.
I buy that. I mean, I'm agnostic on the question of whether the toilet stuff is real or fantasy, kind of paranoid fantasy. For me, it just kind of makes more sense thematically if it is just kind of in his head, because I agree with you that the later stuff is probably also in his head. I don't think that, like, he doesn't know really what happened, and that's kind of the point, is like he doesn't, the whole point of the conversation, and this, we're going to talk about this a lot more when we get to Night Moves, but the whole point about the conversation is what you think you see is not necessarily what you see.
Yeah.
And what you think you hear, like, he has the ability to bring out this information, and he can give you this crystal clear audio of like what they said, but what is meant by what they said is still a matter of interpretation. So you still have to bring your own thing to it.
This is what this film does so well, though, is that, again, like I said before, it is definitely from his perspective. You are seeing his perspective, his point of view directly. Every time he listens to that audio, and by the way, they actually recorded that audio differently with different inflections on the words on different occasions that he listens to it. So he is hearing it differently at different times, and you're hearing what he's hearing. So you're essentially following what he is interpreting from the audio. And that is, of course, the biggest problem, is that what he interprets is what actually he gets it wrong, essentially.
Right.
And I can see that, like, I can see him spiraling into paranoia because of it. I bought it. I didn't have a problem.
I buy it. I don't. It's not that I don't buy it. I guess I just like it. It was the less interesting route for me. Like, it was kind of like, yeah, okay,
well, I mean, it is an obvious ending. I mean,
but that's also like, we're kind of looking at it 40 years later.
I'm not going to say the ending is necessarily the smartest way they could have went with it. It's a very kind of obvious ending. It's one of several probably obvious endings for this. But I still liked it. I liked that he tore his entire apartment apart, and then you're still left wondering where the bug actually is. Apparently, Coppola didn't even come to a decision where the bug actually was. I'm guessing it's in the saxophone somewhere.
It could be in the saxophone, or it could be, I mean, for me, it's like, you can never find everything. Like if they want to hide it, I mean, we see in the film, like, Harry Call, he sets up like basically sniper scopes from like hundreds of feet away with a microphone.
Yeah.
It could be
shotgun mics.
It could be next door. It could be anywhere. Like, there's like that, and that's kind of where I land on, and that's like almost literally the very first shot of the film. Or the second or third shot of the film, because it starts off in that big, kind of slow zoom in sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's no reason that bug has to be anywhere close to this guy. Like, it could very easily be very far away, or there could be multiple bugs. Like, we have no, like, and I think that's kind of where I kind of land on the, like, it's, Harry might be bad at what he does, but, or in protecting himself, but there's, like, at some point, like, he can't. Like, there's just, like, you can only build a bubble so big and so thick. This film, pretty much when this film was released in '74, this is kind of the height of Watergate, and sort of that sort of taping and kind of audio surveillance and stuff was on people's minds. But it was written, kind of conceived in the mid '60s. And for me, I connect this much more clearly with this sort of mid '60s James Bond sort of idea, where Harry Call is almost a response to the kind of spy, hero gadget guy, that James Bond kind of was in the early days, and all the, not necessarily even James Bond, but all the James Bond ripoffs. You think all the terrible spy thrillers that were out there, and the kind of '60s. Kennedy adventurism and sort of the way that he approached his foreign policy. And that was what connected me into, the kind of military technology and the kind of, stuff that I was mentioning earlier. And the kind of idea of, like, we have, like, the run up to the war in Iraq, we had this intelligence, we had this huge intelligence apparatus that was telling us things and that was giving us information. But ultimately it's being interpreted through this very particular lens, and we're getting the wrong answer. Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which you can say was a failure of intelligence, and you can say it was a failure of, like, the politics informed the way the intelligence was interpreted or whatever. But that was kind of where my head started going. I also started thinking about the drone program, because you think about like the guys who operate those drones, the men and women who operate the drones. They basically have like 9 to 5 jobs, sitting in an office, like, you know, operating what's essentially a video game for like an 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour shift. But they talk about how bored they are. They talk about they talk about like there are a lot of these guys. I read a piece the other day. They're talking about like how they're getting PTSD from just watching people that they care about, because they've been sitting and watching them on drones and get shot at and shit, and they can't do anything about it because drones are another thing that, you know, like it starts off and it's out in Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan and shit now, but you know what's going to, in 10 years they're going to be everywhere, and this is going to be something that we're going to have to deal with here in North America, you know, no question. And it is like one of those things, like there's nothing morally reprehensible about a drone, you know, it's just a little flying robot, but like what it's used for and the intent that it's put towards is totally a question of like our moral choice and the choice that the technology gives us. And that's kind of how I feel about surveillance in general. And I think that was kind of where I started thinking about with the film. And then when it kind of becomes about like Harry's paranoia and about like him kind of falling into this trap, for me it was definitely just sort of like I thought there was a more that kind of more interesting kind of bigger picture direction it could have gone in. And so that's maybe kind of the genesis of my, not even criticism of the film, because it's not really meant to be a criticism of the film. It's really just more like, I kind of wanted it to do something else. But
I can see that. I will say I do feel like at the very end, though, it feels like Harry Call sort of is at peace with his situation to a certain degree. Like he's sitting there playing his saxophone. That's pretty much the only thing that centers him throughout the whole film.
Well, what else can you do? Like he's ripped up everything. I mean, he's literally, you see him destroy the Virgin Mary. Like, I mean, this one thing that he did not want to destroy. He destroys that Virgin Mary, and he still gets nowhere in terms of trying to find the microphone. I mean, it's a fitting metaphor for he's destroyed everything in his life.
Yeah,
he has nothing at this point. So if I've got nothing, who do I care? What do I care if people are listening at this point? You know, and so he's just like, okay, I guess I am a murderer or accessory to murder. People are listening, and my life is shit. And well, what else? What else are you gonna do? I'll just sit and play my saxophone, and you know, that's where he ends.
Yeah. So the budget for this was $1.6 million estimated, and in the U.S. at least it grossed $4.4 million. So had a pretty good return for its day. Interesting note, and I think this is something a lot of people kind of who are familiar with the film go to. Hackman later played a former NSA agent who is a surveillance expert in the Will Smith film Enemy of the State from '98.
Yep,
and they used to show images of his younger self. They actually just took images from this film to use it, like on his ID and stuff. And I
haven't seen that movie in forever. I need to go back and rewatch it now that I've watched this recently.
And there's definitely some people who go, you know, kind of a nod, wink, wink. This is Harry Call. This is the end result of years of paranoia after the 70s. You know. This is where that character might have gone if he had lived on. This is apparently Coppola's favorite of his movies. Gene Hackman actually learned to play the saxophone for this film, and you can definitely tell he's kind of an amateur while you're watching him play. Like,
but I mean, the character is supposed to be an amateur. I mean, you know, like it's not supposed to be. Oh, I'm a professional saxophone player. It's like I'm a dude who likes to sit and, you know, play the saxophone alongside my jazz records. It's like such the like dorkiest hobby ever, you know what I mean? Like it fits this character so well because it's so like not like something it's so not James Bond, if that makes sense.
Well, also
go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say it's kind of neat that this is a guy who works with sound all the time, and at the beginning they make a sort of point of how his job is essentially taking little bits of sound that he picks from different parts and putting it all together into one package. He's actually kind of trying to do that with his jazz records. He's trying to complete them. He's trying to put sound into them that he thinks should be in there. I thought that was kind of neat. I like that.
Did you, since you and I, and I'll, this is inside baseball, but since you and I are both like podcast producers, you know, like did you Did you have a moment when you're like watching him, like doing the like recordings and everything and like setting up? Did you kind of go like, man, Audacity makes this so much easier?
I gotta say,
he has to have this little box that he plugs it into, and he can like remove the sound of the band or whatever. And I'm like, I got a piece of software that does that for me. So
yeah, and it's cool. He actually invents all of his own stuff. Like he builds all of his own machines too. That's how closed and guarded he is. Harrison Ford's bit part as Martin Stett. Apparently, I didn't pick up on it, but apparently Harrison Ford decided to play this character as gay.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that, but apparently that got him a bigger part in the film. Coppola was impressed with him and apparently gave him more to do in the film. Apparently, he was only going to have like a couple lines before or something like that.
Oh, that's I read that as like, you go, Harrison Ford, for being a really good actor for basically playing a gay man as not any different from anyone else. Yeah. Like that's you go. Yeah, no. I think Harrison Ford's. I mean, that guy's really going somewhere. That guy's really going to have a career. And I
got to say, kudos to him for being menacing without just looking old and pointing at people. He in this film he actually did something, so it was good.
He actually he's got it's really kind of one of those where you piece it together afterwards. Oh, this is what was really going on, because clearly Harrison Ford was showing up and he was like talking to Moran, and Moran convinced the Meredith character to basically seduce Harry and then steal the tape or whatever, and you kind of piece it together later. Or at least for me, it's not something that like you get it instantly. Something's going on, and you're kind of in Harry's headspace with that. Like Harry knows like there's some shit going on. I don't know what it is, but and it kind of comes from a direction it's really obvious that this is what would happen, but at the same time, it's kind of like, well, how do you avoid it on something like it's kind of I mean, there are things he could have done to avoid it, but he was kind of forced by social nicety to allow it to happen. There's so much great stuff in this movie.
Yeah. Of course, Robert Duvall is the sort of director who hires out Harry for the job. Eventually, he's uncredited in this, just a cameo part.
Yeah, he's got like 3 lines or something.
Like
Can you count your money outside? I think is his most.
Interesting. The zoom shots in this film are. It was a new technique that was, I guess, debuted in this film. Automatic zooms that they controlled via sort of like robotic control or whatever. Before that, movie cameras didn't have that. If you tried to do the zoom for any sort of prolonged amount of time, you would kind of, as a human operator physically moving the camera, you'd actually lose it apparently. So these prolonged zooms are sort of this new technology that they brought in through this film, innovated in this film, I guess. And speaking of the cameras, if you notice the neat little thing at the end there where the actual camera is starting to swing back and forth, it actually mimics the way a security camera works, right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
No, that's true. Yeah. I didn't think of that until you mentioned it, but yeah, no, that makes sense.
All right. I think a big win-win for that film from both of us. And we can definitely move on now to 1975's Night Moves.
I think Harry would like me to leave.
Well, I don't think that's necessary.
I think Harry thinks it is.
Harry thinks if you call him Harry one more time, he's going to make you eat that cat.
Gene Hackman is Harry Mosby
Hello, Harry.
in Night Moves.
Well, come on, take a swing at me, Harry, the way Sam Spade would.
He's a private investigator.
I drove to Delhi. Would you believe Delilah? Well, she's gone.
How long gone?
2 weeks. Go find her.
Making a living
Well, let's say 125 a day and legitimate expenses.
from other people's lives.
You can get cheaper.
Can I get better? You're hired.
Making a mess of his own.
God, you're really prime, Ellen. You know that? I catch you screwing another guy and you attack my lifestyle!
Lifestyle has nothing to do with it!
Night Moves. It's a mystery
I'm looking for Deli Grassner.
Deli isn't around here anymore.
where the suspects are also the victims.
I want to know what I walked into.
Ask your wife.
Well, are we going to talk about it?
But it's your ball, run with it.
Where the questions
All right, what's it all about, Mosby?
Is there still much smuggling going on around here?
The dogs have fleas.
Where were you when Kennedy got shot?
have too many answers. Where every clue is a lie.
I've been listening to your ping pong talk long enough. What was in Marv Elman's plane? Drugs? Was it drugs?
Night Moves.
Check. Check.
Ah, it's a beauty.
It's a game where every player is a pawn.
Harry Mosby, isn't it?
Every move is a wrong one. And the winner loses everything.
I want to know what it's all about.
I told you what it's all about.
You. What the hell are you all about?
You're asking the wrong question.
Gene Hackman in Night Moves.
Directed by Arthur Penn, who is, of course, famous for Bonnie and Clyde and Little Big Man. Written by Alan Sharp, starring Gene Hackman as another Harry. This time he's Harry Mosby. Jennifer Warren as Paula. Edward Binns as Joey Ziegler. Harris Yulin as Marty Heller. Kenneth Mars as Nick. Janet Ward as Arlene Iverson. A very young James Woods as Quentin. Anthony Costello as Marv Elman. John Crawford as Tom Iverson, and debuting, at least first credited role for Melanie Griffith, 16 or 17-year-old Melanie Griffith at the time, as Delilah Deli Grassner. And if you want to give a little synopsis there, Daniel.
Sure. I kind of want to do this in a world. I kind of whenever I like, oh yeah, come to you, in a world where sex is given away for money. No. So Harry Mosby, played by Gene Hackman, is a private detective. He's a private dick who doesn't go in for all this newfangled technology, computerized stuff, despite the fact that his wife manages to get most of the information he needs for this case for him through the computers that he so despises. This should tell you a whole lot about Harry Mosby as a character. Mosby is he's a man who's independent. He's a kind of former football star, a little bit of a meathead, but he feels like he has this code of honor. He feels like he has this, I'm a private eye. I'm independent. I'm a detective. He gets a case where he is going to have to track down this young girl who has run away from home. He tracks this girl down through basically a couple of Hollywood stuntmen, who are doing some pretty cool little stunts. One of which is Quentin, James Woods in an early role. He eventually tracks down this young girl, Deli, who was named Delilah because her father apparently always wanted to make a sword and sandal flick, which really dates. I mean, the old Hollywoodness of some of this film. I think I'm definitely going to want to talk about here in a minute. He tracks down this young girl in Florida, where she is being kind of kept by her stepfather and his young, kind of beautiful girlfriend. He tries to convince Deli to come back to Los Angeles with him. They kind of go out on the water. They find a dead body, and shit ensues from there. Deli does end up coming back to California, and in the end, it turns out the case that Harry was working on was not the case he thought he was working on, and I think really explaining more about the plot would kind of be superfluous at this point. So I think the one thing I didn't mention is that Deli is a young girl. She's 16, 17. The character's supposed to be 16, but I think Griffith was 17 at the time. But
sure.
Definitely that budding sexuality thing, and she's a woman or a girl really, who is using her sexuality and to manipulate a lot of the people around her, and that's an important element of the film that I missed on that kind of brief synopsis. But I think we'll talk about that here momentarily. So,
I didn't even think about it at the time when we first decided to do these two films together, but there's actually a lot of connections between these two films outside of it, both of them starring Gene Hackman. Both of these characters that Gene Hackman plays, and here it's just a testament to what a great actor he is, where he basically plays a character who on the outside looks night and day from Harry Caul. Like he's just a totally different character altogether in a certain respect. But both of these guys are kind of really connected at a certain level, where both of them are really bad at certain things in their life. Like where Harry Caul is really bad at keeping his privacy, Gene Hackman's a really bad detective. Like
yeah, we're gonna. I mean and that's the, like, you don't realize that at first. I mean, it is it is this sort of he's a plotter, is what he is. It's not that he's terrible. It's that he thinks it's Dunning-Kruger syndrome, right? The sense of where basically the half of all drivers think they're above average, that people who are actually really good drivers tend to underrate their skills, but people who are really bad tend to overrate their skills, and that covers across huge amounts of things, including podcast about movies. So I think I'm a brilliant discusser of movies on podcasts. I think I'm one of the best in the world, really. And Harry Mosby thinks he's a very good detective. He thinks he's a man who's kind of the spitting image of a Marlowe or a Sam Spade. And
well, I only think I'm an average podcaster. So where does that really put me?
Well, you may have an accurate impression of your podcasting abilities, which is kind of where a lot of people land. But or you may be actually really low and you only think you're about average. But I think most people who think they're average are about average. And I was joking. I think I'm okay at this. But
I still like you, Daniel.
I like you too. We're just this is a love test between you and I. Should we turn the microphones off and have some private time? Is that kind of where we're landing?
No, they can listen.
Yeah, well, Gene Hackman's character, Harry Mosby, would not approve.
No, he is the
conversation we just had.
He's
a righteous homophobe in this film. I'm gonna, he definitely throws the faggot word out there at least a couple of times.
And he makes fun of Romer films or whatever. From what I
is
understand.
it about a homosexual relationship?
I think it is.
Okay. I actually, it's One Night at Maud's. I looked it up. I didn't get a chance to watch it before recording, but it's on my. I mean, I have it available to watch, so I'm probably going to try to watch that before next week. So
I know there's an infidelity angle to it.
There's definitely an infidelity angle. I mean, it's definitely intended by Penn. Penn was a huge Romer fan, so to a certain degree, like the film's most famous line is him it's really him. It's not him making fun of Romer. It's him making fun of his own characters and making fun of Mosby. It's him pointing out, like, this is how, like, incurious and stupid Mosby is, and that he thinks, Romer films are like watching paint dry. I mean, that's such a. I mean, Romer's films are if you know anything about Romer, I mean, he's such a filmmaker dedicated to kind of subtle character studies and subtle, like, kind of moral ambiguities and this kind of, like, existential kind of questions. And the fact that Mosby just has no interest in that tells you really all you need to know about Mosby at the beginning. Another element that I overlooked in my kind of initial summary is that Mosby's wife is cheating on him with this man who is stereotypically kind of in this kind of traditionally constructed way less of a man than Mosby. He walks with a limp. He has a cane. He isn't is virile, and Mosby thinks, well, you're clearly not the right man for my wife. If you're not as capable as me, if you're not as virile as me. But that's really Mosby's downfall in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not someone who is ever any good at sports or anything like that, so I'm just gonna say this out loud. He's a nice football player. He's a meathead. Like, he's a jock. Like, this isn't some guy with like this like deep and subtle grasp of like human psychology. This is a guy who kind of wanted to be a tough guy and kind of got a job as a private detective so he could go be a tough guy and feel like a man. And he's definitely compensating for something.
Yeah, well, I mean, they do make a point of the relationship between him and his wife, where she basically makes allusions to, I'm with you because I know there's something else there in your life. Like, you are deeper on some level, not necessarily when it comes to doing his job all that well, but there is some sort of buried thing in there that she's been trying to get him to open up about for the longest time, and he hasn't, and that's kind of what's pushed her away from him at the opening of the film to a certain degree.
I think that she almost like accepts his private detective agency as almost like a hobby that keeps him out of the house, like more so. Like, it doesn't feel like she's really the one making the money, and he's making a little bit of money, but it's not like, it's not like he's really bringing home the bacon sort of thing. And I think if that's the relationship that they have, I don't think that that's a negative thing towards either one of them. But I think that Mosby can't admit to himself that he's not like that. This is just almost kind of a hobby that he's keeping himself busy with. And he thinks he's really like doing good in the world, and he's not. He
has this really romantic version of what his job is. I mean, he definitely sees himself, like you said, he sees himself as the Sam Spade of old or whatever, when at this point detective agencies are becoming conglomerated, computerized enterprises where they send you like an audio tape of all the information you need on the person you're hunting down and all this other stuff. And he resents that and rejects it. Although deep down he knows he's a joke, and he knows that his job is, for the most part, and this film kind of makes a point of it, that detectives really aren't glamorous at all, probably never really were. It's a lot of sitting in your car, taking photographs, or waiting for people to show up to certain places. Like, he makes a point of, in one of his conversations with Paula, they're talking about, like, where were you when the Kennedys were assassinated or whatever, right? And he's like, I was sitting in my car waiting for this cheating husband to come home with his girlfriend or something like that. And, it's just the banality of it all.
Yeah, I mean that's like 90% of a like private detective's life is like you're literally just sitting and waiting for somebody to come out of a room so you can take a photograph or whatever. Like, and that's your life. Like, that's it's not really dissimilar from Harry Call's life.
Yeah,
in that regard. I mean, he's sitting in a van and just waiting for people to have a conversation so he can Mosby isn't nearly as good at his job as Call is at his, but. There are very definite like similarities between these two characters and thematic connections. It's interesting that stunt work is such a kind of an underlying theme of this film, because stunt work is another kind of like you put your body on the line. You basically to be a stuntman. I mean, again, not to denigrate the stunt profession, but this is a profession built on a bunch of men and women who are basically just willing to risk their lives and their bodies. I mean, there are technical skills involved in this sort of thing, but I mean, it's basically you've got to be dumb enough to throw yourself off a roof. Like that's kind of what being a stuntman is. Harry thinks it's kind of romantic and exciting, and at one point he's even like trying to get, hey, can you give me some stunt work? I'd love to get in on this. And it speaks so much to his, that this dude in his 40s is like, yeah, I'd love to like do some stunt work. And it's like, dude, like you're so not like gonna be this guy.
I mean, you're in shape and all, but you're not cut out for this stuff.
Yeah.
I really like that this film is very much like The Long Goodbye to a certain degree. It's kind of a really existentialist sort of detective film, or existentialist, I should say. It's not about the plot at all, because if you actually focus on this film, and I've watched this film several times, so I have actually picked up certain key things that you're really not supposed to pick up on the first viewing. But even
it's really built for like the second, third, fourth viewing. Like it's.
But even then, the whole point of the film is not the plot at all. Much like The Long Goodbye, it's not the plot; it's how the plot affects the central character. And again, like in the conversation, you're following Harry's point of view. You're following him. You're seeing how he interprets things, and so when he misses something, you're almost pre-programmed to miss it as well. And he misses everything. Like, he is going in one direction, and he's missing everything that's happening around him for the most part. And even then, if you go back and you try to connect the clues in this film, and there are some that sort of vaguely connect, but at the same time, there's a lot of ambiguity in this film. There's still a lot of motivations and plot machinations that have gone on at some point in the past that you don't see in this film, that don't make sense, and you can't make any more sense of them than Harry can. I mean, you're still left in the same boat as he is, literally, in the end of the film.
Can we? Should we talk a bit about the ending, or should we dig into that, or do you want to? I've got some characters I want to talk about as well. If that's
okay. Well, yeah. Go to the characters first.
Okay, I really appreciated Jennifer Warren in this film.
Mm-hmm.
She plays Paula.
Yep.
She was probably my favorite. I mean, she was probably my favorite character in the film, with no denigrating. Which I think this may be Gene Hackman's greatest performance.
I would agree.
I think this is a phenomenal performance, and I will speak very highly. I want to speak generally of Gene Hackman before we end off tonight. But Jennifer Warren is phenomenal here as this woman who is kind of accepted her lot in life. I think. She's literally breeding dolphins at the beginning of the film to sell as pets for people. Yeah. Because rich assholes want dolphins.
Want to keep pets in their pools.
Keep pets in their pools. And I mean, that's such this morally reprehensible thing to do. And that's the world that all of these characters live in. This is a morally, rudderless world, as we kind of the central, the metaphor at the very end is he's literally on a boat that has no rudder. If we're talking about obvious, visual metaphors, that's definitely the one. But it's so effective here. And I think that you get that in everybody, we kind of have this question of what's right and what's wrong. I don't know, what the fuck, who cares? So I mean, but Paula, I think, is basically a good person who kind of gets in over her head. I think that she does have a genuine attraction to Harry. I think there's a mutual attraction, I guess, is kind of where I land. Certainly Harry is attracted to Paula, but I think Paula sees something in Harry that she likes, even if she kind of sees him for what he is even more than he does. I think that she responds to something in his kind of wounded nature or something, and this. I like the relationship. I love that scene that they have together where he sees she asks him where he was when Kennedy was shot, and this is a film that exists so clearly. Both of these films, but this one in particular is so much about that kind of cultural malaise and the counterculture that happened after the Kennedys were shot and when Nixon was elected, and just the sense of despair that the 60s are over, and the idea that we were going to try to save the world and change the world and make the world a better place, and we failed. And Nixon's in charge, and now Ford's in charge, and we're just fucked. I mean, and that's what the 70s were. This period was for so many people, and you get that in Deli's mom. You get that sense of kind of the glory days are past, and this kind of embracing of her sexuality is almost a weapon against Harry, and this sort of sense of the way that really all three of the major female characters are using their sexuality as a tool and a weapon, as a way of navigating the world, because that's all they have at this. You can't even blame them. But I think Paula is just this really fascinating figure. in the film, and really, I mean, beautiful. Not to, I mean,
Yeah.
let's not overstate that, but
especially when she lets her hair down. Yeah.
yeah, I love her in the cap. I just kind of, you know, I was like, man, she's adorable. Like I'm down with that. But you know, I love that wounded, aging kind of ex-hippie kind of thing, and
Yeah.
you know, it's such a subtle and brilliant performance, and she's so watchable. For me, I'm drawn to her. You know, this wounded character who I really responded to her performance, and I wanted to mention that.
Yeah, well, the film definitely has sort of an undercurrent of everyone sort of has this like troubled past to some degree. I mean, Harry has the whole thing where he was trying to find his father who abandoned him as a child. Paula, not so much is disclosed. She does mention that she's had, you know, a pretty sort of rough life, like she's gone from job to job and finally found herself here with Iverson. But yeah, she's sort of a really nice contrast to Mosley in a lot of ways. Like she has, you know, moved on. She's accepted her lot in life. She's fine with who she is. She knows, you know, I'm in my place and I'm good where I am. And she's an adult. She's grown up. She has done what Mosley was never able to do and grow up and accept who he is. So that I think that's probably one of the most interesting things about her. And at the same time, her past still connects with his. She knows he's you know, troubled in some way, and she sympathizes with him. That's why partly why they connect so well, and there is that romantic spark there. And I always get the feeling that probably could have gone somewhere. Like he might have ended up staying in Florida if things had changed differently, right?
I mean, there's no question that there is a spark there, and you know, it doesn't have to be anything more than just you know, two kind of lonely souls reaching out to one another. I mean, you know, I think that that's enough for what we see. I think that those kind of languid South Florida, you know, nights, you know, these kind of, you know, the mosquitoes are biting and the humidity is high, and you know, hey, come and let's have a little companionship through this, and you know, I get that. I mean, you really get this sense of, particularly those sequences in Florida, for me, like you really get this very clear sense of place. I don't even know if that was actually shot on the Florida Keys, but it's so evocative. The other major female, or one of the other female characters in the film is definitely Melanie Griffith as Deli. And maybe it's the fact that it's Melanie Griffith. I mean, I don't see it. Like I look at her and
doesn't look like her. Yeah.
I mean, it's just, even when you think about like Working Girl, you think about like a few years later when, or I guess Working Girl's like 10 years later.
Yeah, it's 10 years.
You know, but you think of like her later work, even not even like now where she's had the plastic surgery and everything. But I kind of have this image of what Melanie Griffith looks like, and this is a girl. This is not a woman. This is a girl. You know, it would be tempting to say Lolita figure, but it's not that, because Lolita was younger,
14 or something, right?
14 or something, and was completely innocent. There was not a sense of, I mean, and Deli is finding herself and what she wants to be in this life, and finding her own freedoms, and is kind of being to some degree manipulated and to some degree kind of abused by benign neglect, if that makes sense, you know, where her stepfather is you know, I mean, he even says, like, I want to fuck my daughter, essentially, you know. You know, there should be a law. Well, actually, there is.
Yeah, there is a law.
That's one of my favorite lines. I loved that bit. You know, I've known teenagers like this. You know, like I've known people who didn't exactly know how to navigate this kind of sexual awakening, and this kind of the way that people respond to them all of a sudden, feeling like they needed to experiment with that. And the real tragedy for this character is that she's just in this place where people are just using her, and where, you know, she doesn't have the support network that she needs, and that's a failure of everyone else in this film. I mean, you know, I think Paula does what she can, but it's like, I mean, there is this just like, well, she's gonna do her thing. Like she's just wild. She's just gonna, and I don't think that like they should have like an authoritarian, like, no, you're not allowed to have sex, young girl. But I think that she really needed some guidance, you know?
Yeah, she needed a parental figure of some sort. And I mean, it's even sort of hinted that could have been from Mosley in a different world, you know, like
Yeah.
But he fails her as well. Like once he's done with his case and he leaves her back with her mother, and the fight that ensues out in the driveway with her mother and Quentin, and you could tell he feels kind of bad about it. Like he's like, I fucked up again. Like I fucked that up.
Mosby's more interested in being the hero private detective than he is in actually figuring out what's going on and actually understanding who these people are. Like I've got a case, I've got this thing, I've got to do it, and doesn't look any deeper than that. He doesn't, and the signs are there, the clues are there. I mean, he's being manipulated, partly by Paula, but it's not just that. It's he's allowing himself to miss these things, and I think that's the central tragedy of the character is just that he's willfully blind to this stuff. Obviously, the other major female character is Mosby's wife. Who we get a sense of like they do have a pretty solid relationship on some ways. I mean, this is not like the easy thing to do would be to make this a completely just failed marriage. Two people who just despise each other or just have completely. They try to make it work, and they've even done towards the end, they've actually kind of they're making steps towards like really trying to repair the relationship. And at first, I thought the kind of the marriage, the kind of the crumbling marriage element of it would be an even bigger part of the film. But it's so depressing. I watch it and I'm just like, because I've been in kind of bad relationships before, and in kind of like long term, not a marriage, but a long term relationship that was kind of not going long for the world, and kind of like trying to work stuff out and going through some terrible shit. And the feeling of being with somebody who you love and who loves you, but also at the same time you just can't make it work is it's very well drawn here. One of the things I appreciated about both of these films is that these are films for adults. This is not Iron Man swooping in to save the day. I mean, these are films fundamentally about like this guy's marriage or this guy's loneliness or whatever. It's really about like I can't imagine seeing this when I was like 19 and getting a whole lot out of it. I mean, I would have gotten things out of it, but it's such a richer film as an adult, kind of scene. Yeah,
Hackman's performance in this. One of the major things is the infidelity. He takes this case almost basically to get away from it, just to put it in the back of his mind for a while, and it doesn't really work because I think that's pretty much what's distracting him for the most part. I mean, not that he would necessarily pick up on all this even if he was totally focused, but the infidelity and everything is like really sidetracking him and keeping him unfocused on the case. I love the scene where he confronts the crippled guy that she is shacking up with. You just see it in his physical performance, how shaken he is, and the adrenaline flowing, like where he's pointing at him and his hand is shaking and he's bucking his knee while he's standing and everything. I'm like, wow, that really looks authentically like how a guy who is pretending to be tough at that moment but is like really visibly shaken would act. And I just really appreciated that. That was sort of the one scene that put it over the edge for me to cite this as his best performance over his performance in The Conversation. So,
well, I think, it's you're spoiled for choice tonight. Yeah. Really, like it's not to say that The Conversation is a bad performance, but the Conversation is a little bit more. I don't want to say one note, but it's a little bit more kind of one thing. Mm-hmm. Whereas Night Moves has to work, not just he can't just be kind of a tough guy. He can't just be kind of a weak guy pretending to be a tough guy. He kind of has to be both, depending on where you are on the viewing and kind of where you are in terms of your own knowledge of what's going on in the film. Because kind of rewatching bits of it, the second time, you get totally different things out of his performance than you did kind of the first go through and different elements that he's able to bring to the forefront. So it's a really complicated and nuanced performance, I guess, is kind of where I land on that.
Just focusing for a brief moment on James Woods' character. He's basically just got a bit part here as Quentin. And
I like to think his last name was Tarantino. Like in an alternate universe, it's like he goes on and he makes movies about like this crazy case, although he dies in the film. But
They fished Quentin Tarantino's body out of the dolphin pen, and yeah. But I found it interesting. Like, one of the central things here that Harry doesn't pick up on until the very last of the film is that several of these people are involved in a smuggling operation, and basically the whole key to this is that they're smuggling artifacts out of Mexico, which was definitely a big thing back in that day. That was definitely a criminal enterprise. Probably still happens.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, but the film, like I said before, it doesn't piece everything together for you. It never quite pieces together how connected some of these people are or who did what. It makes allusions to the idea that maybe Quentin has killed a couple people in this film. I don't think he has. I think he's totally innocent. He's like probably the most innocent character in this film.
I was going to say, I think Quentin's really the most moral character in the film. Like I think he gets kind of his place in this kind of hierarchy. He kind of understands there are forces that are beyond his control, and he was kind of happy to fuck Deli for a while, and then once she's kind of moved on, he's like, I'm just going to do my job. I mean, he's a red herring. I mean, I love the moment where Mosby kind of watches the footage that they shot, and he sees, oh, Quentin was down there. He was fucking with the thing. What is he set some trap, and it's like, no, I don't think anything. I think Quentin was completely blameless in this.
Yeah.
And I haven't gone through with like a notepad and like taking notes on exactly what was going on, and maybe I could be convinced that Quentin maybe was a part of this, but I don't think he had anything to do with it. I think he was caught up in it, and I think he just I think he genuinely cared for Deli too.
Yeah,
I think that's his flaw. He cared for Deli, and Deli was I think blameless. I don't think Deli was doing anything. I mean, she's just a young girl. And then she ends up getting killed because she happened to find this body. Like,
I'm not even convinced she was killed because of that she knew too much. I'm kind of thinking even that was just a coincidence.
You think it might have been an accident?
I think there's actually a couple of major coincidental accidents in this. The plane with the body in it, I believe that was a coincidence as well. I don't think it was a sabotage. I don't think...
You think the guy just, like, he just flew wrong? I mean, he just made a mistake and he just died? See, I was kind of thought maybe he was bringing in material, like he was bringing in part of the artifact or something.
Well, his plane has the big artifact that they float to the top at the end of the film, right?
Right.
And I think that the film leads you to believe that there has to be a connection, because you go into that mindset of, oh yeah, it's a detective film. All these little angles have to connect at the end at some point, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? No, I think a lot of this stuff was just coincidence, and because Mosley is in that Sam Spade mindset,
right.
He has to believe that there's connections here when there really isn't, and I think that just adds to the part of the confusion. Again, you're following his point of view. You start to buy into what he's buying into. And I think the film's brilliant in that way.
I can buy that. I'd want to kind of sit down and again look at it again, maybe with a pad of paper, and like start taking notes and see it. But I mean, that misses the point of the film, really, because the point of the film is the kind of confusion. But I feel like there is a way to put it together. But I think what we're putting our finger on without meaning to is I've been following a little bit of like true crime stuff lately, just in some podcasts and stuff. And my kind of not talking about movies on this podcast life. There is this kind of element to a lot of that, to where like you don't know how the pieces fit together because you don't have enough information, because it's a real thing. And so it's like, well, this person gave this statement to the police at this time, and like, was that person lying, or was that person telling the truth? And ultimately, you're talking about probabilities. What's the most probable option, and is the most probable option really the right option? Was there this crazy thing that happened to happen? And I think that like piling up the coincidences in Night Moves, kind of you start to go like, yeah, that feels. I can buy that the pilot crashed without there being any kind of overt sabotage. It seems like a really big coincidence that the boat that Paula just happened to stop the boat right there where the plane was downed, sort of thing.
Well, I think they might have knew. I think Iverson suspected where it was, or perhaps knew where it crashed, and
Okay.
got them out there to find it.
Okay.
And just confuse Mosley even more. I think
that would make sense. Yeah. So then, I can buy that. I think for me, like, I can buy that the plane crash was a real thing. That was just a plane crash. But I think that Deli was probably actually killed, like, intentionally.
Well,
just because I think once she saw the body, like I think they just thought she's not going to be quiet, and so
just think about who was in that plane at the end that's sinking down when he's looking through the window.
Right.
I have a hard time buying that because of who that person is in that plane. Like, when you think about that person's connection to Deli,
right,
and connection to, like, where he was when she died. I don't want to give that part away. I think that's something people need to see for themselves in the film if they haven't seen it. So I'm trying to skirt around it here.
I can't believe this is the thing we're, like, avoiding spoilers on, but, like, I buy that. I'm okay with that. I mean, I don't want to start digging into the debate on that. I mean, I think you can. We've probably gone farther than we really even need to. But it's a brilliant film, and it's one that. Like, I kind of have the ideal viewing experience on this because I watched it without knowing anything about it. I had actually read reviews of it. I know Roger Ebert did not only an original review in '74, but in the early 2000s he did a great movies review of it. And I had actually read both before I watched the film, but I'd forgotten it. Like, I didn't remember. So I went into this clean, and so I was like, oh, kind of detective film, Gene Hackman. Yeah, I'm down. Like, cool. Like, it'll be like another Popeye Doyle a little bit, like that's kind of the approach I took to this. Yeah. And then it kind of becomes character study, and I'm like, oh yeah, kind of a nifty, like, character study. But a guy and his wife is cheating on him, and he's doing this case, and it's kind of a Marlowe pastiche. Okay, yeah, I'm down. Like, I'm kind of like, I'm definitely interested. And then in the last 20 minutes, it just becomes something like it totally transforms. And that's one of the great experiences, like the best way to experience this film other than seeing it on the big screen. I wish I'd had that opportunity. But, I say this at the end now that we've spoiled, like, so much about this film. If you haven't seen this film, go watch it right now. It's brilliant and know nothing about it. So,
this, like the conversation, they're pretty widely available on DVDs. I think I neglected to even look up the DVD and stuff info for these ones. I was doing all these other notes of all these brilliant things I discovered in these fucking films, and then I forgot to do that. But I do love the sort of jazz scores in both of these. Like, I'm not even a jazz guy, but there's these nice little subtle jazz things going on in both these films. The conversation especially has got this, like, really sad, kind of lonely piano jazz thing going on for the most part. So I like that. The Michael Small score for Night Moves is apparently it was lost. Like, the master tapes were lost, so it doesn't really exist as a put together score from what I can gather.
By the way, Night Moves, you can buy it for $5 on Amazon from the DVD. Or you can, I think, rent it for $2 if you want to stream it. If you can't, find it through some other method, and it's worth your $2. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, if you these are definitely films to own. So yeah, I guess we could probably go on and on, but let's cut it off there. Daniel, tell us about your Doctor Who podcast.
Absolutely. Well, I do have a Doctor Who podcast. It's called Oi Spaceman, a Doctor Who love story. You can find it at Oi Spaceman. That's OI Spaceman, all one word, .libsyn.com. I do it with my wife. We do classic and new series. And there's significantly less Melanie Griffith nudity in Doctor Who. But it's worth watching anyway. If you're a Doctor Who nerd, go check us out. And I'm going to keep saying it. I can't imagine anybody would be on episode 53 of this podcast and not know about Always Spaceman, but maybe this is the first time listener. We get some new people and didn't know about Always Spaceman. So go check it out.
New listeners always go for the latest one. So
No, I'm down for that. I'm just saying, like, it does seem like, oh yeah, sure. I get the feeling like the audience just skips over that little bit where I say that every week.
So you can leave your questions and comments. I realize I have to redo the end trailer yet again now that we have a Facebook group. Thanks, Mr. Balk, yet again for making complications in my life. If that Facebook group fails, I'm going to totally blame you, by the way, Stuart. But yeah, Facebook, iTunes, our Podbean site, all those different places. You'll hear where you can go and send us questions and comments and ideas for movies to review. And until then, thank you everyone for listening, and thank you for joining me, Daniel, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Good time. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to They Must Be Destroyed on Sight. To see the host's other stuff, as well as links to websites and podcasts of similar interest, and as well to leave comments, questions, movie requests, and other suggestions, visit us at tmbdos.podbean.com. From there, you can also find us on iTunes. You got this, man. You got this by the ass.